Hello, and welcome to the Social Power Lab podcast, brought to you by Vokes Leadership Group.
Hello. It's Adrian Deschamps III, everybody's favorite fun-sized French boy, coming at you with this week's edition of the Social Power Lab, brought to you by VLG, which is short for Video Lottery Gaming. No, wait, it's short for Vokes Leadership Group. And if you're already a loyal listener, you will know I am most certainly not Adrian Deschamps III, nor am I Adrian Deschamps II. I'm certainly not the first. I'm a pale imposter. It's me, Dr. Ted, and I'm flying solo this week with a special edition of the Social Power Lab. It's a Q&A edition, and we are also going to explore what's coming down the pipeline from Vokes Leadership Group to help you with all of your power tool needs. You see what I did there? Yeah, I did a little clever. Never mind. Try to keep up. All right. So my usual wingmen are both on assignment this week, and you're going to have to tolerate a lone introvert striving to be Adrian without a snowball's chance in hell. But I'm enthusiastic at the very least, and I'll do the very best I can to keep you engaged and learning about social power and all things social psychology, because at the heart of all things social psychology is, in fact, social power. That is not an overstatement. We will demonstrate that in the coming weeks and in the book, that the very foundations of human social interaction are always and forevermore mediated through the exercise of social power. So, but hold us to account. We will prove our assertions about the nature of social reality. So let's see, what are we going to start with? I'm going to do some questions that have come up in various training situations that we have been in from some wonderful listeners who have insights and burning questions that they would like answers to. And wherever possible, I'm going to give credit for the questions. Some folks are a little bit shy about that, so we respect that. But nonetheless, we're going to answer those questions in this evening's podcast. And well, you could be listening at any time of the day, but truth be known, it's it's well and truly evening where I'm doing this from. The weather outside is dark, and we're going to talk about dark traits with a question, actually a series of questions. Eh, Social power doesn't only apply to people with dark personality traits. We went into the dark personality traits right after we outlined the 12 forms of social power in our first 4 or 5 episodes. Then we go into the dark traits in the next, I think, 6 episodes. We'll catalog it, but and how people with dark traits use power, because that is, well, with the brain's negativity bias, we are more attuned to those who abuse power than we are attuned to those who we experience as exercising their power ethically, morally, responsibly, and in line with the mission for which you and they are obviously interacting in the course of, let's say, the workplace. Um, so um, so it is kind of a dark episode, but that's where everybody's brain kind of goes, partly out of a morbid sense of curiosity, but more to the point because it really impacts us. If you recall, 20% of the general population will have some combination of elevated dark personality traits, and that is 1 in 5. If you know only 4 people, maybe you don't know somebody who is inclined to exploit, abuse, and otherwise utilize other people for their own personal ends. But in all likelihood, you have crossed paths probably more than once or twice with such individuals. And of course, they don't, wear an villain mask or have it stamped on their forehead, caution, approach uh, to dark traded individuals, something to that effect. That doesn't happen either. So if you do listen to those episodes, you will learn about their tactics and their strategies, or five strategies. Um, but out of that have come some terrific questions about how people with dark traits um, exercise power, and how they abuse it, and how it's very, very different from how those in that more 80% zone are naturally inclined to exercise power with a sense of fairness, with a sense of respect for other people's power, and for with an ability to actually focus on, let's say, a team or organizational mission as opposed to their own ego needs. So yeah, let's go into some of the questions that have come up, and they're great questions, very penetrating. So the first one I've got this week came from a participant in some training that we were doing on social power and its application to leadership. Um, and the question was, do people with dark traits know that they are abusing social power? And, that's to say, do they just abuse power because they're wired for it and they don't know better? And that might imply that if they knew better, that, maybe they could be trained not to use power that way and use it in a socially appropriate way. So that would be sort of an ignorance hypothesis that people with dark traits, aren't aware that their preferred ways of exercising social power are abusive and disrespectful and harmful to others. And sadly, because if that were the case, maybe there would be some hope of, you know, teaching people not to abuse others, but that's not what the science is telling us. They absolutely know what they're doing. They know how, if we're listening to one of those episodes when we were rolling out the dark traits and their strategies. One of their core strategies is something called kiss up and kick down. And if you can kiss up to those who you're trying to impress, or leave with an impression that you're a good, fine, upstanding member of, the whatever group that you're purporting to belong to, um, then turn around and kick down towards those that you have power over, or think you can get away with it with regards to, then you definitely know what you're doing. It's that old adage: if you're on a date with somebody and they're kind and gracious to you, but then they're rude to the waiter, pay attention to how they behave towards the server, because let's face it, they have more power, and it is enticing to them. It is gratifying to them to denigrate somebody, to disrespect somebody's power. Um, most of us don't care if the server is our server and we're there to be served a meal, and that's their job. And if they do a good job, we're going to leave them with a tip and everything. But most of us won't see that person as available for abuse, available to have a scene in front of, or to take out my need to, treat somebody with cruelty and contempt, by, being indignant about how they, passed the plate to me, or if there a little bit of water spilled on the table or something, and just taking that as an opportunity to denigrate them. Um, so that's gratifying for people with dark traits. That is, I used an analogy of whatever your favorite food is. They'll have favorite foods too, so the analogy is only halfway effective. They'll be gratified by eating their favorite chocolate bar, as somebody else who loves that chocolate bar would be, who's not dark. But our reward center doesn't go off around the exercise of social power the way those with dark traits do. Will light up and feel gratifying because I am exploiting somebody, Machiavellianism. I am hurting somebody, sadism. I am lauding myself over somebody, narcissism, and I am exploiting somebody, leeching something that I want from them, which would be psychopathy. So these senses of gratification that they get, if you can't fathom that those things are gratifying to another human brain, you probably aren't dark. Okay. If it's hard to imagine or put yourself in their shoes and think, then you're not likely in the dark tetrad. So if they are utilizing power in that way, which would be we would feel crappy about ourselves if we were doing it. Maybe we lose our temper and we behave that way, but then we feel awful about it later and we want to apologize and make right. And so they will delight in the discomfort, the pain, the diminishment of that other person. So they absolutely know when they're abusing power because they can behave in ways that would make it appear as though they are not in any way, shape, or form inclined to abuse power. And, we've done culture audits in many, many, many organizations over the course of our team's reign of practice. Reign, my God, it sounds like, okay. In the time that we've been practicing together, we've done many, many culture audits, which is a scary word, audit. So when we're doing them, we usually call them culture reviews. But what we're doing is we're looking at how the people in this team, division, or entire corporation tend to, in a pattern kind of way, interact with one another. And we're looking for all kinds of dynamics, particularly how power is used. So, and I'm going to bring in something we're doing a lot of fantastic work on, thanks to the leadership and keen insights and brilliant theoretical mind that is Amir, on psychological safety. I'll talk a bit about that. But if you remember that trust is just a matter of how I expect you to use your power in relation to me. Trust, mistrust. So if I expect you to use it in a way that won't harm me and might even advantage me or will help me and you in achieving the mission, then I'm good. And if you do that often, I'm going to trust you. But if you are inclined to use your power to frustrate me, get in my way of me contributing to the team or preventing yourself from doing so and being a free rider or something like that, I'm not going to trust you. And so the idea here is that, oh my gosh, I've got so many. You see, this is the problem not having wingmen because I can usually surf off them. And, if I lose my train of thought, because I tend to have a lot of trains of thought at one time, none of which seem to have a caboose, I might add, which is very frustrating because I can just go on at length. But my point, I had one on that one. It'll probably come back. So we have been talking about this inclination, this desire, yes, of people with dark traits to delight in abusing social power. And I think I'm working my way back to that point where we could never bring ourselves to use to engage in a power tactic like they will, because we feel crappy about ourselves. They feel great about themselves. They feel more powerful for using those dark tactics. So yes, and I'm coming around now. Back to culture audits. In the course of that, we are looking for, the strengths of a team. We always use a strengths-based approach. How is power being utilized on a regular basis on this team, group, division, organization, in a way that's aligned with the mission, that supports people in putting their time, attention, energy towards the mission. And so that's the strengths-based side. But we're also looking where there are power dynamics in play that are antithetical to the achievement of the mission. They get in people's way. And, an innocuous example of that, one that's not driven by dark traits, would simply be, somebody who's still filling out a bunch of forms by hand because we've always done it that way. Now that's a practice, that's a normative practice, and you have to fill in the forms and things like that. That is not draconian. It's not been implemented by somebody to make your life more difficult, although it could feel that way when you're filling out those forms. At least it does to my brain. But no, there's a purpose behind those. Now, maybe there's a better way to do it, or there have been some instances where the data is already being collected at an earlier stage in the process, and what this person now is doing is filling in information that's already in the system. So my point in that is that's something where power is misaligned, but not for a malevolent reason. It's because we've always done it this way. There was a purpose in the past, and now that and the thing about culture is, it's that whole thing. Why do we do it this way? Because we've always done it that way. Nobody can really remember why we started doing it that way, but we always have. And so every now and then, a culture audit gives you a chance to hold up certain practices and say, they still fit. Should we still be, doing this because we don't need to anymore. It's not furthering the mission. It's burning time, attention, and energy away from the mission. Now that's something that can come out in a culture review, culture audit, but more frequently it is how somebody or some subset within an organization are using power in an abusive fashion. They're using power to further their own interests at the expense of others, and frequently at the expense of the mission, because they really don't care about the mission. They will focus on the mission only insofar as it might make them look bad if they didn't. But they'll abuse individuals, they'll abuse the culture, they'll create a culture of mistrust and psychological risk, unsafety, if you will. So that's a kind of a long-winded and circuitous route to answer a great question. Do people with dark traits know they are abusing power? Yeah, they do, and they do it willfully and with pleasure, because it sets off the alarm center in the brain, which is the pleasure center, right? So that's question number one. At this point, I'd like to be, handing it off to Amir for more commentary. And Amir, I know at one point you'd be listening to this when you're back from assignment, and I'm very curious to know what you'd add at this point. Adrian too. But I am flying solo. So on to the next question. And this question came from a CEO who is just an extraordinary human being, and consequently an extraordinary leader. Uh, we get to work with amazing people at all tiers within an organization that are deeply committed to why they're there. And the organizations we get to work with, despite the fact that we're often working around issues where there are people with dark traits, the organizations and the leaders we get to work with who are trying to resolve those issues are deeply inspiring. So this came from one such CEO. I hope at some point I'll be able to say his name, but I didn't seek to request that from him at this point. So, we're honored to work with he and the organization that he leads, which is just a huge group of wonderful human beings. So the question was, can people with dark traits be treated or coached into becoming not dark? And love the question, right? Because it conveys how I entered the study of, starting with dark traits, and of course was been studying social power all my professional life, and so I entered it really, really biased towards looking for, hoping for data that would say that people with dark traits could come around. They could see the error of their ways. They could have an aha moment and say, "Boy, I've been a real bastard, and I really need to treat people better." Um, and So it's a hopeful question, and it's really one that I hoped would turn out to not have the answer I'm about to give. So can people with dark traits be treated or coached into becoming not dark? And Unfortunately, again, the science really strongly demonstrates an emphatic no. That there are no treatments, nor if it's a dark personality trait, do we have any kind of mandate to treat it unless somebody comes to a psychotherapist and says, I'm highly narcissistic. It's not working for me in life, so I need to learn, to be less so, or to develop some empathy or something like that. There are cases where people, even psychopaths, will come to the realization that the way that they're showing up in the world, it might get them what they want in the short run, but it can work against them in the long run, particularly people who end up spending a lot of time in prison. Um, it's 20 to 30% of most prison populations are psychopaths, and they only make up about 3% of the general population. So uh, that's back to the crux of this. We've seen leaders who really didn't, who were like me in the early days and really didn't want to believe that this person couldn't be coached. And they're great leaders. They were optimistic. They thought, I can get through to this person. And every time they'll come back to us a week later after some kind of significant coaching effort, where they initially think they're getting through, and then no, not at all. And they go, all right, let's talk about how we really manage these individuals. So that's the answer here is treatment no, coaching no, and in fact, treatment and coaching can actually be counterproductive to those who are already being victimized, because if they learn more about how other people think and feel, this is why they learned early on not to try to teach empathy to psychopaths, because they didn't become more empathetic. They didn't care about other human beings any more than they did before, but now they knew how to read and manipulate empathy better. So now it's considered not appropriate to try to teach empathy to psychopaths. Um, if you coach them to, use their power in a non-exploitive kind of way, see that's not interesting to them. That's not gratifying to them. They know how to do it, but they're not, if you'll forgive the expression, they're not getting off on it. And it's not just lighting up that, and maybe not fair to equate it as I just did, but it is deeply gratifying, however you want to frame gratification. Let's put it that way. They have no motivation to change other than when you performance or behavior manage them. In, let's say, in a workplace, or if if you have somebody in a family, you get together with your other members of the family and you say, when they do X, we all do Y. We don't bite, we don't engage, so when they take a pot shot at, one of us around the dinner table, um, we simply ignore the comment and carry on with our usual conversation as though that person doesn't exist, meaning that I'm not going to fight back because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a fight. They're looking to stir things up, and I just don't go and I move along. Now it can be hard in the initial stages of, behavior managing somebody that way. And when it's a workplace, we develop highly detailed behavior management plans with the organizations that we work with when they have somebody who would be dark and might also meet the criteria for high conflict, which the dark traits underlie, virtually all high conflict individuals. Some individuals are high conflict, but they're covert about it. So they create a lot of conflict, but they try not to be seen to do that. So it's a different manifestation of high conflict, but conflict is gratifying for them. So we can contain this behavior in the workplace. And in those cases, there's only three things that can happen when you have an airtight behavior management plan and you have the right people with the right power in place to contain their behavior when they start to abuse it. This behavior management plan could be overtly rolled out, and therefore they might probably be on the progressive discipline path, or it could be covertly rolled out, and that sounds Machiavellian. And the weird thing is, with these individuals, to a degree, you have to be Machiavellian. You can't show all your cards because they'll exploit them. So everybody around this individual who can be let into, we're now managing this behavior in the workplace. It won't be peers, but it'll be, the person's direct boss and maybe an assistant to that boss and then maybe the boss's boss, that sort of thing. They'll all be in the loop and they will, know how to respond when the high conflict person acts out in an inappropriate way in the workplace. And they say, when, you raise your voice in a meeting, the meeting ends. We will discuss this another time when you're able to contain your voice or your emotions, and therefore you don't raise your voice. That would be setting a boundary, and you have to follow through. And there could be progressive discipline associated with that in the workplace. Of course, you probably don't have a progressive discipline policy in a family, although I suppose some might. Family cultures are pretty interesting and pretty creative. That's the thing. We have seen no evidence that these individuals can be treated or coached unless they see it as in their best interest to do so, but they won't do it happily. Okay, I've got 5 years to retirement. I'm not going to get a salary and benefits like I have now. I will behave for the next 5 years. Now, you're going to have to watch them, by the way. They won't, if they think they can go back to their old tactics, they will. But as long as that behavior management plan is in place, they can decide, I will behave appropriately because they know what they're doing. So it's not like they don't know, they're learning a whole new set of skills. No, they're just not able to use the set of skills that are abusive of power. So they can get that. They can say, screw this, I'm out of here. I should have gone into the roofing business with my brother-in-law years ago, or I should have gone into the cupcake making business with my sister-in-law years ago. Pick your one. They'll often quit saying they're going on to something much bigger and much better, like you don't deserve me. So they're punishing you by quitting in their minds. Hopefully once they leave, you can have a round of applause. But yeah, or they will perhaps agree to it in print at the outset, but then they will do things to try to exercise power in familiar and satisfying ways to them, and they will put themselves on the progressive discipline process, in which case they may eventually learn, okay, I got to behave myself if I'm going to make it to retirement here, or they will get themselves terminated because they violated repeatedly all of the workplace expectations. So that's two questions. I'm impressed with me because there's no one else to be impressed with. But yeah. So let's take a quick break here so that we can tell you more about what our sponsor does. That would be us. But yeah, I will be right back after this message.
This week's spotlight from Vokes Leadership Group is on executive and team coaching. Effective leadership is never static. It evolves in response to shifting culture dynamics, power structures, and organizational change. At Vokes Leadership Group, we partner with leaders and teams to transform self awareness into meaningful action, bridging the persistent gap between knowing and doing. Our approach helps identify the subtle power dynamics that shapes every workplace interaction, both visible and unseen. Through this awareness, leaders can cultivate environments that balance influence with integrity and strategy with empathy. Leadership can also be challenging and at times isolating. Volk's Leadership Group is always standing by, so you don't have to carry that weight alone. Thank you, and back to today's episode.
And I am back. I was going to try and do a terrible impression of Amir, but I'm just not that funny. So you're still with Ted. So where are we going now? We answered two questions, brilliant questions, and I want to thank the people who provided them. And I've got the next one is actually fairly quick, but then we're going to go into some other really great ones. Should you ever tell somebody you know to be dark that they are dark? Right? And a variant on this is, should you tell somebody who's high conflict that they're high conflict? And there's four criteria, behavioral criteria, about what constitutes somebody who's high conflict. We talk about it in an earlier episode, the first in this series on dark traits, probably starting episode 6 or 7 in there. So if you want to know more about high conflict, it's a behavioral manifestation of people who have dark personality traits. So should you ever tell somebody who you've discerned as dark that in fact they're dark? Well, in psychology, there are almost no nevers, but this would be really close to never. Really, we have not seen it to be advantageous. You may want to say it. You're high conflict, or you may want to say, you're a psychopath, or you're a grandiose narcissist, or what have you. What you're doing, first of all, they're going to go, ha, ha, you're the narcissist, right? Or I've known all along you're a psychopath, and so they're gonna turn it on you as quickly as possible. And it won't have the effect that they're going to go, oh my God, I'm so ashamed that I'm a narcissist. No, they're not. Um, so as much as you might want to say it to them, I have yet to see an instance where somebody did and then came back and said, oh yeah, that was exactly the right thing to do. There's a number of reasons for it. One of the first and foremost is that you're telling them about some psychology that they may be aware of, but they may not. We've seen it where somebody, said, you're high conflict, and the person, of course, said they weren't, and said you're high conflict, and then, when that interaction ended, they went off, Googled high conflict, found Bill Eddy's work from the High Conflict Institute, and drilled down into it, and then started to weaponize that knowledge, even though they were in fact high conflict. They were dark, but they started to try to use that to attribute those characteristics to other human beings, and that's a form of gaslighting, which we also talk about in earlier episodes. And I'm about to talk about one of them very, very in my next question here. So we would typically say you better have figured out a really good reason to tell somebody that they're dark or high conflict. Um, and calculate that well, because once you put it's information power, right? You're giving them information power, a classification of behavior that has psychological underpinnings to it, that allows you to make certain predictions about how they're going to behave and whatnot. You don't necessarily want to give that away. If they Google it or they found it out already, well, so be it. But you don't want to be the one who actually gives them that big tip. And they are very good at leveraging information against other people. They've been doing it, you know, most if not all of their lives. And so I, if anybody has an example of when they told somebody that and it went well, I'd love to hear it. I won't say that there's absolutely no circumstances where it might not be advised, but I'd be inclined the only time I'd be inclined to do that is if they, I knew that I was departing them and I would never ever have to cross paths with them again. But in the world that we live in, that is so online and whatnot, I don't know how you do that. So, if they're getting on a transit ship to Mars and, it's a long trip, trip there and you never intend to go there, maybe, but there's still social media, even in Mars. So, um, anyway, how do I know this? I'm not a physicist, but I'm a science nerd. I try to understand this stuff. So, yeah, that's kind of interesting. That it's and Bill Eddy says the same thing. By the way, he says, "You don't tell somebody who's dark." Well, he says it in terms of high conflict, but that they're high conflict. Um, so here's another really powerful one that a number of people have pulled me aside at various training sessions and whatnot when after we talked about gaslighting and this particular form of gaslighting called identity assault. So identity assault is where somebody who is going to be close to you, as in either they're a boss, a coworker, or a family member. In other words, you're not a casual acquaintance. Um, they choose to denigrate you. This is the verbal bullying, and there's different ways to do it. But the ultimate effect is you start to come to question yourself, your own identity. You're not half the leader, you think you are. Or, people tell you you're a good leader, but they're just sucking up because they know you're so easily manipulatable. Things like that. Manipulatable. I don't think that's a word, or at least a variant on it. But I feel like I'm channeling Adrian a little bit tonight. Thanks, Adrian. I appreciate you sending those positive vibes my way. So how do you break out of this identity assault? Because again, if somebody who's a stranger insults you, it's not nice, but you'll shake it off. You'll go about your life. You'll refer to them as a jerk, and you won't want. But if it's somebody who is very close to you, a parent, a sibling, a friend who you thought was a friend, but maybe they're an ambiguous friend. Sometimes they treat you well, sometimes they don't. Classic narcissism, right? Intermittent reinforcement schedule. Draws you in and then slaps you down, and then you draws you in and slaps you down. So that really keeps people hooked, by the way. That's how slot machines work, with the intermittent reinforcement schedules. Look it up, IntroPsych. It's great stuff. B.F. Skinner. So when you start, they corrode your own sense of reality about you, the very essence of who you are, and you come to doubt yourself, and you come to think of yourself in the terms that they describe you, and you feel, like all this time I'm the narcissist, or I'm, the manipulative one, the Machiavellian. However they frame it, you feel You give them reality shaping power because they're close to you. And at one time you trusted them, right? They tend to build a bond in order to exploit you through that bond. So you give them reality shaping power because you start out thinking that they respect you, and then they little by little turn around on you and start to abuse you psychologically, and you come to question your very sense of who you are and what your motives are, because they'll tell you your motives aren't what you say they are. They're this, right? You're not volunteering time, at that charity, because you care about their cause. You're there because you don't want to do work around the house, and so you take off every Saturday and leave me with all of the dirty work to do. Right? And so that's what they'll play to. How do you break it? Well, these individuals, if they're really close to you, they'll try to isolate you. They'll try to cut off other counter versions of reality from other people, but it's almost impossible to do entirely. Um, I shouldn't say that. There are people that are indeed cut off from all contact, through monitoring, through prevention of going out and seeing other people or interacting with them. And we've even seen that in teams where a boss will prevent any team member from ever speaking to somebody from outside their team in the workplace. Now, of course, it doesn't work, but it's a high conflict tactic that's sometimes used. So identity assault, when it is only going to be effective by somebody who's very close to you, and you've given them reality shaping power, and they lead you to question your own very sense of being. How do you push back against that? Well, part of it is understanding everything we've been talking about as a tactic and whatnot. But that's only part of it. The breakthroughs that I have seen, or when somebody has come up to me and said, I feel like I'm an absolute worst boss I could possibly be since this person came in my team. Like I used to think I was a pretty decent leader, and now I question every decision I make, and I think am I self-serving and whatnot, right? What we'll have people do is think about who else in your world is telling you that same message, right? And count them up. And if there's one, as in one additional to that, that dark individual, first of all, consider whether that person might be a negative advocate, somebody working with the high conflict person, the dark person, call them flying monkeys, to colluding with them to also help them, destroy your own sense of self. But if it's not somebody well, most people will go, I can't think of anybody. Like, this is not a message I've ever had before in my life. There are people who haven't liked me and people that do like me, but people, other people who I'm close to have never given me this message about how horrible a boss I am, or how horrible a human being I am, or what have you. Now, that's still not quite enough, because what the dark individual's tactic will often be is, they don't know you like I know you. I know the real you, right? It's just a facade you put up there, but I see through it all. I see your bullshit. And so that's sort of their counter argument. But understand that that is a tactic that they will use. And I go back to, let's start counting all the people who don't give you anything like that message about who you are. And people start to go through, and you can go back in time, and you can say, how many of your teachers, who, worked with you for a whole year in class, ever gave you messages that you were like this? And it's interesting when you help them go back in time too. They start to see a pattern. Like, no, I've never been like this. I wasn't like this in grade school. The way that this person's describing me. That's not how people related to me, and it's not the message that I got from them. So, now identity assault is massive when it's gone on for any length of time and you've given somebody significant reality shaping power. What you're going to have to do now is take reality shaping power away from them and not buy into their version of reality. And we coach leaders on this all the time, and we refer people who might have somebody in their family like this to clinical psychologists for support, and insight and understanding of what's been done to them. We refer people in the workplace to clinical psychologists when they have been abused by somebody with power in the workplace. And remember, 12 forms of power, that doesn't mean somebody who has more legitimate power than them. Somebody who has power that to shape your reality about you, in that fact. So that's how we start to break it. It doesn't break overnight, but I've seen so many people go, "Oh my God." And like there's this weight lifted. They're not fine and fine and fine at that point. They still, but you see this initial weight lift as they go, "Nobody says I am," or only he does, and his best friend, right? But they're of one mind. You know, um, so it, then you go, wow, nobody else in the world says of this of me. Maybe I should listen to the majority opinion here, not only now, but over time in one's history. It's staggering what a weight that if you really take it on, you could lift from yourself that they put there. It's and don't give me this, I was weak. And if I was stronger, they couldn't have done that. No, nobody is equipped to deal with this 20% and their dark traits and their tactics and their strategies. That's not, and unless you grow up in a highly dysfunctional cultural environment of that nature, no, that's you're not weak. Your kindness, your humanity, your sense of justice and fairness is being exploited. That's not weakness. They see it as weakness. That is not weakness. That is integrity. That is a strong sense of who I am and how I want to show up in the world. And I don't want to adopt a cynical view of every human being. I don't even want to adopt a cynical view of the dark individuals. I just want to protect myself from them and know that they are more than willing to exploit me if I open myself up to that. I can't say I have no resentment because I have seen a lot of abuse in workplaces that never ever had to happen, and I get pretty pissed, but can't act on that. Have to act. You treat people who are have dark personality traits as any other human being with rights and whatnot, but we can doesn't mean we don't have to hold them to account for their harmful choices that they make towards others. So there you go. There is how do we break the identity assault form of gaslighting, which in my view is amongst the toughest to contend with. And I'll do a talk about the various forms of gaslighting in more depth at another point. But I find this one the most insidious and well, I guess the great expression that I learned when I was in grad school, because grad school is described like this, it's soul crushing. And most of us who've been through grad school have had our souls crushed once or twice, but or much more than that. But it's a different kind of soul crushing that happens with this gaslighting tactic from dark people. So that covers off four great questions, and I'm gonna probably end with, well, let's see how much time I have. One last question that I was incredibly moved by and appreciative of because it gave me a real opportunity to dialogue with folks. I think there's about 300 in the room at the time about this question. And in my view, it might be the question of certainly the question of the week, but it could be the question of the year when it comes to social power. Um, and Everything comes down to social power. So maybe it is the most profound question ever. Now, so this took place at the HRPA chapter regional forum, forum called Leadership in Action, that I was very, very fortunate to be asked to speak at on the topic of the abuse of power by people with dark traits. And this happened several weeks ago in Hamilton, Ontario, with the Human Resources Professional Association, who are a wonderful group here in Canada, who really are the association for the HR professionals. And they have chapters in different regions, and I was one of the speakers that day. Um, I met a man who I was in the first in the afternoon to speak, but who was on a panel discussion on leadership in the morning. And I'm Ray, I'm going to apologize in advance because I did not pick up on how to pronounce your last name. So I'm going to do a disservice to you here. Ray Remoter. He spoke in the morning panel discussion with tremendous insight and wisdom, as were all the panel members. Ray is a regional partner with Level 52 Incorporated, and he's also the owner of Achieve Excellence Performance Consulting. Um, I'd had the privilege of watching him in the morning, and then he was kind enough to sit through my discussion, and he came up with the question that, some of you may have picked up. I might have said this once or twice. Questions are far, far more important than answers. I mean, answers are important. They are consequential. They are vital. But the question is, there's an expression from Ming Dao. Questions are the masters, and answers are the servants. And the way you frame a question and what question you think to ask steers the direction of reality shaping thereafter. Um, and so Another topic, but it's a cool one nonetheless. Questions tell you much more about someone's intellect than simply the answers. So Ray had one of these, apparently simple questions, but you know what? Nobody has ever asked it. Certainly not in this way. And it's the question that I am now going forward. If nobody asks it, and nobody does, I am going to ask it before the end of the training that we do. Um, and it was so heartfelt by Ray as he raised it, because he was taking in what I was speaking about around the dark traits, and it's 20% of the general population. And I said something about, yes, it's 20% of the population. I did the math, and was able to say how many millions in the greater Toronto Hamilton area there are of the dark traits, with a specific number, and then I'd say and all of them want into your organization, right? Well, they all want more power, and that may involve them wanting to get into your organization, but sometimes I say things for effect. Anyway, so everybody in the room is an HR professional. They can all relate to these traits that they're now learning about, and they're starting to see the strategies and the tactics that these people deploy. And just like me, when I was learning about this, there's this state of astonishment that, oh my God, this really is something big. So I've been building the suspense on and on your behalf, Ray, because it just really really, it was brilliant. And one of these things, it was like right between the eyes. Like it hit me right between the eyes. He said what I think everybody was feeling, not thinking. I think everyone was feeling, but hadn't articulated. But Ray, you said it. He said, you know, it's 20% of the population. And, you remember you pausing at that point, and the room was quiet, and everybody was crystallizing where you were going with this, and I believe you said, at least the way my brain recounts it is, you know, what's the antidote, right? What's the cure? What do we do? And like you could have heard a pin drop at that point, because it was such a penetrating question. And since I'd never been asked that question that pointedly before, I did not have a pat answer at all. But it crystallized just as he had crystallized that question. It crystallized instantly. And I said, it's the 80%. The 80% is the antidote to the 20. Um, we, on that 80% side, have to not power members in the relationship. So we have to ensure that the relationship doesn't feed their power desire, that there are constraints, there are boundaries, so that they don't get the gratification from harming or manipulating or controlling, coercing other people. And that involves creating cultures of psychological safety. That's sort of the quick answer, but it's a little more complicated than that. But cultures that don't celebrate, dysfunction, and here's a little aside before I wrap up. I've been uh, somebody who I've known for many, many years has joined the dialogue on social power in a really, really big way, and she is breathing more insight into my understanding of social power cross culturally. Um, Now I study cultures and whatnot, but there are more cultures than any one human being could ever study in a lifetime. And she's been, because she's so well traveled. She's been so many um, different national ethnic cultures in the course of her professional life, and having to adapt to them so readily. She's been teaching me about how some cultures normalize and even embrace or celebrate some or even many of the dark trait power tactics that we discuss. In other words, that they're considered normative or acceptable, or that's just what you do. And while other cultures will eschew and admonish those who attempt to use those same tactics. So, does the culture support this kind of behavior that those with the dark traits love and covet? Or does it reject and people who are trying to exercise power in those ways? What fires together wires together. So if I am successful at using a dark trait and I get away with it, well, that burns into my brain a neural network that says, "Hey, there's gratification using this pattern. Try it again. Try it again." Now, that's one thing. That's the bully getting away with it, despite other people not approving of that behavior, but maybe not approving of it enough, so they get away with it. But what about the individual who's in a culture where that works for them? They learn it works for them, and oh, by the way, the culture says, and that's how you should be. That's you should manipulate people to get your way. That's virtuous, right? You should enjoy denigrating or browbeating or insulting people in meetings. That's a sign of status and power, right? Well, there are cultures like that. So she has really been gracious in sharing the rich cross cultural experience and she's a keen observer of human behavior. So now that she's learning about power and applying it to her past experiences, we're all benefiting from it. So uh, yeah, that's pretty neat stuff. So where am I going to leave this off now? I got lots to talk about next week. And I suspect, yeah, Adrian will be back off assignment for sure. We're hoping for him here any week now. But yeah, we got some fun things, some exciting things coming down the pipe. Um, with some actual products that we're going to be making available, and you can see previews of these products on our revised and revamped and upgraded website, which our producer Trent just queued up and made live, so you can see our products page, and the podcast is one of the products, and of course you don't pay for that. But we've got two other exciting ones that I'll just hold you in advance about, or you can go to our website and click on products, and you'll see these new products that are coming to hopefully help your life easier in some profound ways. We're doing some really exciting stuff on psychological safety, thanks to Amir's leadership and penetrating insights into the construct. Has everything to do with power, of course. And I'll end with some really good news for our team. We're really proud to announce that we have a new senior practitioner who has joined our team. Somebody who is multi-talented, happens to be doing her second PhD. So she's already a doc, but I guess she can be a double doctor when she finishes her second PhD. But she has come on board as our senior practitioner, Narges Azizi, doctor, or doctor again soon. And she's a senior practitioner. I'll let you go and check her out on the website because she is there now. But we're going to do an interview if I can induce her to come on and get her to talk for a few minutes about her career and her experiences and how she's been for quite some time now learning about social power as well, how it sort of reframes her experience. She's had incredible experience as a sociologist, now becoming also an applied social psychologist. And she was in like the banking industry for like 20 some odd years, doing, huge surveys and that sort of thing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll save her thunder for when she can actually join us. And so, how would Adrian wrap this up? Oh gosh, I only did the intro, and I'm not ready to do an Adrian outro. But listen, thanks for hanging in there while I'm a solo act for 1 week. This won't become the norm. And we hope to continue to see you coming out. Please like, subscribe, follow. Also, if you're not if you're on LinkedIn and we're not connected, don't just do a follow, do a connect, and absolutely say yes. um, I would love to be connected, and also with Folks Leadership Group, which has its own LinkedIn page as well. So, and we post, I think, some pretty interesting things on LinkedIn, both about the podcast, but also just about good psychology that comes across often from American Psychological Association and other sources as well that we speak about and put a power spin to inevitably, because that's the one aspect of social science that we have identified that is the massive gaping hole in our ability to fully understand humanity. That said, I will sign off. I am Adrian Ducharme the fourth, everybody's fun-sized French boy, leaving you with a really bad impersonation of him. Okay, so it'll be Ted signing off, and I hope to see you all next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Social Power Lab podcast. Make sure you join us next week as we continue to uncover the hidden dynamics of social power all around us, because every conversation changes the world one interaction at a time. You can listen to the Social Power Lab podcast on YouTube under Social Power Lab _VLG, on Spotify under Social Power Lab, on Substack under Social Power Lab, and on Apple Podcast under Social Power Lab. Thank you and have a wonderful day. This podcast was produced by Trenton Vokes. The theme was produced and written by Adrian Deschamps.